And welcome everyone to the Storycraft Cafe. I'm your host, Hank Garner, and today I am super excited to have one of my favorite people on earth, Miss Beverly Jenkins, here to join me. Beverly Jenkins is the recipient of the 2017 Romance Writers of America Nora Roberts Lifetime Achievement Award. That's a mouthful, Miss Beverly.
Yeah, it is.
As well as the 2016 Romantic Times Reviewer's Choice Award for Historical Romance. She's been nominated for the NAACP Image Award in Literature, was featured both in the documentary Love Between the Covers and on CBS Sunday Morning. Since the publication of Night Song in 1994, she has been leading the charge for multicultural romance and has been a constant darling of reviewers, fans, and her peers alike, garnering accolades for her work from the likes of the Wall Street Journal, People magazine, and NPR. And Miss Beverly is the person that taught me what the term cinnamon roll meant. That was a new one for me, Miss
Yeah,
Beverly.
I
And
understand.
how are you?
I am doing well. It is
Good.
raining, raining. The old car guys used to say it's raining Cadillacs and Buicks, and that is what it is doing outside right now.
Well, speaking of that, you come from kind of the car capital of the U.S., don't you?
Yeah, I'm from Detroit, and I'm a little bit outside of the city right now, but
Yeah.
yeah, it is. We may need to, get the ark out before the end of the day. Thank God for sump pumps. So,
Right,
yeah,
right, right. Well, I'm so excited that you joined us today, Miss Beverly. We got the chance to hang out about a year ago and just had such a fantastic time.
we really
Um,
did.
you are, at this point in your career, you're like 40 something books deep
Yeah,
into your career. Is that right?
I, I think it's 50 something.
Oh,
You know,
mercy.
I, I know, but I'm a slacker compared to like Nora and my good friend Brenda Jackson. It's like just being around them makes me tired.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's 50 something. The readers, they know the answers to those kinds of questions.
Right,
So
right.
I always ask them, how many books do I have? And then they tell me. So that's okay.
So if I remember right, please correct me where I'm wrong, but you originally your original dream was to be a librarian, was to be
Yes. Just
surrounded by books, all
just
that.
books were my thing.
So
It's sort of
that plan didn't exactly work out, but I think this has been a pretty good plan.
yeah, this is a great plan B. Um yeah, I was working I've worked in university libraries, I've worked in corporate libraries, and was content. It was my dream job. And so I think when like most writers, when you get all those um, rejection letters,
Yeah.
because like I said, I got enough to do my house and yours. It didn't bother me. I didn't care about the rejection letters because I was getting up every morning going to a library. So it didn't
Right.
matter to me. But this is not bad for a plan B.
I have to agree with you. I think it's been a pretty good plan B.
Yeah.
Um, for when you talk about those rejection letters, because you were kind of living your dream, working in the library and getting to do that. Did writing feel like it was? Did it ever feel like an unattainable dream, or did you just not put that pressure on yourself? Like,
I
some
was
people would
just,
just get discouraged after a while, but
yeah,
that didn't seem to plague
yeah,
you.
it didn't matter to me because, like I said, I had my dream job, and that's really all I wanted out of life. Um, because I never wanted to be a writer. This is one of those things that I just sort of stumbled into. I had been writing on and off just for me.
Yeah,
Um, I think we talked about me being the editor of my school newspaper in the fourth grade.
fourth grade, right?
Yeah. And finding a bit of success in creative writing classes in high school. But the idea of being a writer never occurred to me. I just wanted to be around books. I didn't want to be around books that I had written. But so here I am, 28 years later, talking to you.
You have carved out your place in the romance genre. And your over the course of your career, your romance books, like they've always been anchored in romance, but the genre you've kind of reached out this way and you've kind of reached out that way, but the anchor that always holds is romance.
Right.
What is it about romance as a genre that that you love so dearly?
Because you can do anything with it. You can do fantasy, you can do mysteries, you can do paranormal, you can do found families, you can do, um, whatever genre or idea or like that you have in reading. We have that for you. And plus you get to explore people's emotions and how people connect, which I think is a skill. You have all these people who say, well, romance is easy to write. Yeah, right. Okay, try it.
Right.
Try it on, 400 pages and then sell it. I think it's probably one of the, if not the hardest genre to write because you're dealing with emotions.
Right.
Um, and that interaction between two people and then the tropes that we have, we love the tropes and being able to spin those. Yeah, you're going to get the happy ending. And I think that is what draws our readers. But the hard part is how to spin that trope in a way that only you can spin it and that makes your book unique and loved. So it's pretty hard to do.
Well, speaking of tropes, how constrained do you feel by the tropes? Or, there are certain things that we come to expect in
Yeah.
certain genres, but are those things that you think about at all? Or, after 50 something books, is it just ingrained in the way you tell stories? How
Well,
do you
you,
feel about those?
well, you can say, okay, today I'm going to write an enemies to lover,
Hmm.
or maybe you want to do found families, or maybe you want to do fake marriage, or maybe you want to do a fake dating. I mean, we got so many things on the menu that you can
Right.
do, and then the joy of putting more than one trope together. So you could have. I've got an enemies to lovers. I've got a fake marriage. We got one bed, which is also a trope. Um, you put all those together in a pot and you're making gumbo on the page, right? So,
Right.
um, but the the readers are intrigued by how are these two people who cannot stand the sight of each other going to work it out so that they get that HEA, the happily ever after, or the HFN, which is happily for now, at the end. And that's the joy in it and the work in it.
Right. Well, speaking of the happily ever after versus the happily for now,
Hmm.
I think that's how you worded it.
Right. Yeah.
Um, do and this was a question that I wanted to ask you, and that I think that's a perfect place to ask this. Is that you've written some standalones and you've
Yeah.
also written series.
Right.
Um, do do the type whether a story is a standalone or a series, does that dictate whether it's a happily ever after or a happily for now?
It
Or am
depends.
I thinking about that all wrong?
Yeah. It depends on the author.
Okay.
Um, Depends on what he or she is writing or they are writing, because we have all identities writing romance now. Um, when I first started, everything was standalone. We weren't didn't get into series until really into the 21st century. Everybody wants series.
Right.
I'm not a good big fan of series still, but but I do what they tell me. Um, Everything was standalone,
Yeah.
and everything was HEA. Only recently, and by recently I mean the last 10, 15 years, have we had the HFN where they're together,
Hmm.
but you're not really sure whether they're going to be still together in 5 years or 10 years. My last historical Wild Rain sort of ended on a HFN kind
Right.
of a note, um, because she was not having kids. She's not, nope, not doing it, um, and didn't want to get married. Which really threw a few people, a curve. They were like, "What?"
That kind of
Um,
messes up the genre trope sometimes.
yeah, it does. But you want to keep the writers on, keep the readers on their toes.
Yeah.
You don't want to write the same book all the time, which is something we try not to do. So it's good to be able to play with that. But so with this next book, there's going to be lots of babies, and for
Yeah.
the traditionalists out there.
Yeah. Speaking of those endings, sometimes when you read a book, you really want to to have some finality. You want to know how these
Hmm.
characters end up. You want to know that they're okay.
Yeah,
Um, and sometimes I love a story that kind of leaves me wondering
yeah,
about them. Not a cliffhanger per se,
right, yeah,
but
yeah,
there's 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 something to a little bit of unfinished business,
yeah, yeah.
that just allows you to walk around for a while with this character still in your head.
Hmm.
What are they doing? Did it happen this way? Did it happen
Yeah,
that way?
yeah.
How do you feel about the way that you stick a landing in a book?
Yeah,
The
each book is
ending.
different, but I think I gave my readers that feeling with Wild Rain. They weren't real sure. I was okay with it.
Yeah.
I had never written a story quite like that before. With I've always had strong women,
Right.
but not anybody who fit um, Spring's life and her goals and her past. So yeah, it's good to stretch your wings a little bit and give readers a different feel. So you try and give them I try and give them a different flavor with each story.
Right.
So, but even when you get the standard HEA ending, I go on tour and people say, "Well, did they have babies? What were the babies like?" I'm like, "Wait a minute, wait a minute. Can we have another book with them?" And I'm like, "Oh God." But I always tell them if I'm doing I don't think I ever revisit my characters in a full story. They may make a cameo in something, in a different book or so, but I'd have to break them up in order
Yeah.
to do and their lives are fine. They don't need me coming in and, messing things up. So,
Right.
move to the next story.
I was interviewing Linwood Barclay this morning, and
Hmm.
he's a psychological suspense bordering on horror
Oh,
author, and he writes a lot of standalones now. And I asked him if when you finish a story, sometimes those characters stay with you. They kind of linger in your head, as kind of friends that you've made.
yeah.
And he said, no. And he said that never. I'm done with those people. I made them up. They're just make believe. And I,
Oh,
go on. And then other people, are like, they're these magic friends that just,
yeah.
exist with you. How do you feel about the characters that you create?
They they stay with me. They stay
Yeah.
with me. Um, I had a reader tell me one time that the people that I write about actually existed, you know, especially the historical people.
Right.
But they live, the ones who are still waiting on books are in what I call my green room in my head. And they're sitting
Yeah.
on the couches, and eating grapes and, smoking cigarettes, whatever, waiting for their turn. So they are as alive as the people whose books have already been completed and I've, sent them off into the sunset. So
Right.
we're all different. We're all different writers. We all bring different stuff to the table. which is why nobody understands writers but other writers. Like, what is
Right.
wrong with y'all? So
Look, I say all the time that we're the only people that can talk about the people that live in our head, and no one wants to put a straitjacket on us. And
yeah, I know that, we're coming to take you away. Oh my.
Miss Beverly, let's go back to the library for just a minute, because
Okay.
you were happily content there, like you said. You were writing for you,
Hmm.
uh, yet you were still sending out submissions.
Well,
So,
not really. I mean,
okay,
I didn't start sending out submissions until, well, I did. I sent out one submission before I got my agent,
okay,
and I was working in the library. But that manuscript was so totally awful that I tell aspiring writers that when I put that book in the mail, the rejection letter almost beat me home from the post office. That's how bad that thing was. So, and ironically or not, it was with Avon who eventually picked me up. I had to be, I don't know, 7 or 8 years before Night Song, but I didn't submit anything else at all. Night Song was something that I was writing just for me, which is Night Song was my first published work. It's something I was just writing for me because the market was basically closed, especially for historicals. So I didn't, those were the only two things that I ever submitted um, before June 3rd, 1993, when I got the call that Avon wanted to buy the books. So no, I wasn't sending out, just that awful book that turned into my first romantic suspense. Because I didn't know, you don't know what you're doing when you're writing that first book. I was like, what is this? Um, Luckily, I grew up in publishing at a time when editors had the time to take you by the
right,
hand and show you how to write commercial fiction, because there is an art to that. Now, editors don't have time for that. They're so overworked and they're wearing so many hats. And, it's just, I feel real bad and concerned for new writers coming up because they don't get that TLC that
right.
we may have gotten, 30 years ago. So, yeah.
Speaking of which, how do you, how has publishing changed? You talked about um, how editors had time then.
Hmm.
Has some of that been due to this point in time about 10 years ago? We talk about the Kindle revolution, and how ebooks um,
Yeah.
started flooding the market, and then which then opened the doors for other authors to come in, and
Hmm.
some of the gatekeepers changing,
Yeah.
and the accessibility not only of books to readers but of publishing to authors.
Yeah.
A lot of things changed.
A lot of
How
things
have you
change.
gotten to witness?
Um, I always give thanks for the indie writers because they were, especially for romance, because as always, we were on the front lines. Um, because they were brave enough and strong enough and talented enough to say, okay, you don't want my book, fine. With the advent of independent publishing, we'll take our ball and play over there. And they learned the formatting and they learned how to upload and they learned how to do the metadata and they learned all those things and how to put the covers together and what makes a good blurb. And all of a sudden they're making a whole lot of money. And publishers were like, huh, don't you want to come play in our playground now? And a lot of them said, no. And some of them said, yeah, but I'm still going to do self publishing, independent publishing. That changed publishing for the better, in the sense, like you said, gatekeepers. But what also changed is the consolidation of the publishers. You lost a lot of good editors.
Yeah.
You lost a lot of good um, marketing and salespeople. And like I said, and they did it for many, didn't replace those people. So, you have editors who may have had two or three authors now have seven or eight or 10
Right.
and trying to, give the care and the concerns to their manuscripts that they used to give for just that small amount when they first started. Um, but the fact that in romance, it's now open to all identities has been a game changer for us. The model for the men, we no longer have the alpha holes. Um, I'm trying to be politically correct and not cuss on your show. Um, we don't have the alpha holes. The females are no longer, white and blonde and blue eyed and a size two.
Right.
Um, Now we have women of all cultures, whether they're Muslim, whether they're Bahamian, whether they're Canadian, whether they're, from South Asia. Um, and it doesn't matter who you love. You can be queer, you can be binary, you can be, we got polyamorous folks writing books now. It's 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 starting, at least for romance, it is starting to resemble the population
Yeah.
because love is love. And the indie writers helped usher that in. So my hat's off to them for kicking down the doors and bringing their table with them. They didn't need a seat at the table. They just brought their own table.
Right. Right. And do you feel like, um, how do I ask this? Um, that them bringing their own table. Um, do you think that part of the indie revolution was that these authors brought readers to the marketplace and kind of proved, see, there is a market for this.
Yeah,
You just haven't been brave enough to give it a try.
right.
Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah, yeah. And not only brave enough to try it for, big publishing, but not hold their nose at it,
Right.
you know? Um, because for them, it's all about the bottom line,
Sure.
and I think for romance publishing, they looked at all the money that they were leaving on the table.
Right.
You know, it still is not as open as it can be or should be, but you have a lot more people of color who are writing, romance, who are also writing, these young women these young women of color who are writing fantasy are going to put me in the poorhouse because, and I tell them on Twitter all the time, y'all need to stop writing these great books.
Right.
Not really, but, you know, um, the indie market has revolutionized so much that um, most of the major genres are now no longer um, as restricted as
Right.
they used to be. I mean, look at N.K. Jemisin and her
Hmm.
Broken Earth trilogy.
Right.
You know,
Fantastic trilogy.
right? 3 Hugos in a row
Right.
by a woman of color. Nobody's ever done that before, let alone a woman of color. I love her books. Oh my God, because I'm a
Yeah.
fantasy reader. So yeah, so these young women about to put me in the poorhouse,
Y-
but
uh,
you want good books.
You do. You do. I want to stick a pin in you just saying because you're a fantasy reader. I want to come back to that in just a minute, but I
Okay.
have to ask you this. Um, because I've always considered myself to be a very broad reader. I
Yeah.
read thrillers, I read suspense, I read a little bit of horror. That's mostly my friend Doug's thing, but
Hmm.
I'll give him that. But I read science fiction, fantasy, and kind of all over the place. And I also love to read some romance.
Yeah.
I don't read all romance, but definitely will stick my head in and see what's going on in the genre. But more than that, I like to, because I'm also a writer, I like to see what great romance authors are doing, uh, especially for interpersonal relationships.
Okay.
Because, if I'm writing a fantasy story, I can pull the things that I learn from romance writers over there to make more believable characters
Right.
with more believable relationships, and that y- that we can all learn from each other.
Oh
And
yeah.
I
Yeah.
always kind of thought, that's the way everyone was. And I had someone tell me the other day, no, not everyone's not that interested in reading all over the place. You're just weird. Some people, they find a subgenre that they love and they just kind of stick with that.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that when you hear, because I know that you're a lover of this and that, and you bring a lot of those things into your writing. What do you think about when someone says, "Oh, readers only read what they read, and that's all you're ever gonna
No,
get in their hands"? I don't necessarily believe that.
I don't believe that either. And and that was and that was part of publishing's problem too.
Right.
And all black people only read black people. No,
Which is a ridiculous assertion.
which is yes.
Yeah.
Um, I'm like you. I think we can all learn from every genre. Um, a lot of times we'll see sci-fi or fantasy, and they'll have a romantic element in it, and it's terrible.
Yeah. Like, please go read a romance book just
Right?
once.
We like it will not give you cooties. Please read a romance so you can improve your writing. Improve at
Right.
least improve your story.
Yeah. And
Because your
if you
writing
have a
may be
wife, please
fine.
go talk to her. And
Yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. Some of the stuff we, that there's a Twitter handle of men who write women, and
yes, hilarious.
oh, put you on the floor laughing.
Hmm.
But and it's not just about the sex.
Right.
It's about the interpersonal relationship and how a couple navigates life. Through whether it's a fantasy, whether it's a mystery, whether. But I'm like you. I mean, we could all learn from each other,
Sure.
and those who don't want to learn wind up writing really bad books. So,
So the pen that I said let's stick in just a minute ago, you are probably most wide known for your historical romances. I
hmm
think that's probably fair to say.
yeah,
But your newest book, Rare Danger, which is a novella, is uh, is set in modern times,
yeah.
and it has different elements. It's kind of an interesting departure for you.
Well, I
What
have
do we have going on in Rare Danger?
Rare Danger. We have a lot, as the little kids used to say where I was growing up. We have a librarian. She's a librarian, and she curates books for people who don't have time to get their own books. And we have a stolen copy of an astronomy book from, um, oh, my brain is just so dead, um, from Mali, the famous Timbuktu library. And we have a guy who's a sort of special ops kind of a guy. So I got to do, and I love, I have five other contemporary suspense stories. And I love doing them because I can blow stuff up. I can have car chases. I can have murders. I can have, people with guns and, and just have a good time doing it.
Right.
So Rare Danger is um, one of those um, romantic suspense Miss Bay of shoot 'em ups in a very short form. So it's a novella that I did for Avon Amazon's publishing wing, Montlake.
So how do you and you mentioned right before we went live that this was a new endeavor with Amazon's Montlake, and you said you have some um some opinions about how it went, and
It went
something.
well.
And I said, hold on to that. Let's talk about
Yeah,
that live.
yeah.
How was that working with Amazon? Because they some of their publishing houses that they've spun up over the last 5, 6, 7, 8, well, but the better part of 10 years now. I'm losing track. Um, they've done some really interesting things in publishing, because Amazon, for you know whether you like it or not, is kind of the 800-pound gorilla
Oh, yeah,
in publishing at the moment. But
yeah,
when they decided to start their own publishing houses, they were uniquely positioned
yeah.
to do that. What's it been like working with them
It
as
was
an from an
great. I
author
mean,
standpoint?
I had a great time. Um, what really struck me was the short length of time it takes for them to go from the finished product to the stores or shelves.
Right.
Um, I was amazed because I think we finished it in June or July, and it went live in November,
The-
which is,
publishing years are kind of like dog years. That's
oh God, yes, yes. Takes at least 8 months, at least eight
right.
months. So that was great. And they also did their first pass pages. For those who don't know what first pass pages are, those are the pages you get and you read through and you look for typos and stuff out of whack and
Right.
what you get after the copy editor gets done. They used a spreadsheet, which was very, very new to me.
Interesting.
In fact, it took me a couple of days to figure out what the hell am I supposed to do with this. So
Right.
I'm so used
That
to the
is.
old way of publishing, but it was different, and it was okay. I mean, it was a good experience for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if we would do it again, me and my agent, but um, it was great to see how their process works.
I wonder, and this is just me wandering into the air. But them kind of proving that the machine can move a little faster than we've become accustomed. I wonder if they'll have any effect on the industry.
Yeah. Well, with just an ebook, you don't have to worry about printers.
Right.
You don't have to worry about, the paper store that's coming out of Canada. You don't have to worry about, you know, shipping the books from Texas to New York City or to Florida and all that. So they don't have all of that weighing down their model. Um, and they can do print on demand, which makes it a lot easier.
Right.
So I don't know. Like I say, it was a good experience for me. We'll see what happens in the future because Amazon is changing stuff every day.
Right.
We've got the issue now with um, the AI not knowing a lot of stuff and striking people's books off of the shelves for silly reasons like you don't have the um, rights to this cover. Yes, we do. So they're going back and forth. And you're reading this and you feel so bad for the authors.
Right.
Um, there's an anthology that some of the romance writers put together to raise money for the Ukraine, and the AI just came in and said, "Well, you can't do this because this, and this." And they were like, "Yes, we can because of this, and this." And you're
Right.
now talking to a person, and that makes it a lot more difficult too. So there are issues with dealing with them right now.
Yeah. Um, Miss Beverly, writing historical fiction is always fascinating to me,
Mhm.
because where the difference between historical fiction and alternative history is
Yeah,
that historical fiction is rooted in something real,
right,
something we can trace back, or a person we can trace back, or
right.
an historical event that we can trace back. How do you go about finding topics that you want to write about? And then, how do you go about anchoring these stories in truth and reality while allowing yourself the freedom to create and to expound on the things we don't know about
Yeah.
history.
Well, I'm a pantser, so I may start a book and not know what I'm doing. I may have a kernel of a character, and that character may be reality based or not.
Yeah.
Um, I may have a kernel of a story that may be reality based or not. But I look at the timeline of where the when the story is going to be set. None of this is known before I start. I've often said that when I start a book, I'm sort of like Moses leading the Israelites through the desert because I don't know where we're going. I'm looking for the pillar cloud to tell me where I'm supposed to be tomorrow. So
Right.
um, but once I sort of know where I'm going, I'll start researching the year. Um, the book Before the Mayflower has a great by Lerone Bennett, who was real active with Jet Magazine when I was growing up. Has a great timeline in Before the Mayflower, which is a history of African Americans in the United States, and he has it broken down into years. And so if I need something to spark me from like 1878, I can
Hmm.
go to that portion of the book and say, oh, okay, well, this happened, that happened, that happened, that happened. And you can use that to educate and entertain by maybe taking that incident or those incidents and having your character read them from a newspaper or relate them to travel and I like for my characters to wear the history.
Right.
So when I wrote Topaz back in 90, I don't know when it was, 98, I guess, um, the main guy is a deputy sheriff from Indian Territory, a deputy marshal. So that pulled in Hanging Judge Parker, who one of his descendants sent me an email
Oh, wow.
a couple years ago saying that the family had read his, because I think he's in two or three of the books, just little cameo parts, and how much they enjoyed it and how I got his personality right. And I was like, whoa, okay. Um,
That's pretty cool.
yeah, it is. So when you're doing something like that, you get the history from the Indian Territory. And he was a black Seminole. His name is Dixon Wild Horse. So you get the Seminole Wars that you can pull in. You can pull in the walk that the Seminoles made from Oklahoma to Mexico to escape the slave catchers. Um, and Black Hat tried to sell them on the way. He was the Seminole chief. I mean, just crazy stuff like that. But
Right.
it all anchors your story. And if you can weave it in a way that doesn't make, the reader's eyes glaze over, then you're doing something. Because when I edit and if my eyes start glazing over, I'm like, okay, too much of this, you know.
Right.
But as a historical writer, and we all have the same problem, we want to put everything in the book. We're like,
Right.
y'all need to know this and this and this and this. And I have to smack myself and say, you're writing a romance. You're not writing a history book. So, pull up a little bit, step back.
W-
Go ahead.
Well, and I think one of the problems that we have is I think so many people are hungry for good history, because as a subject in school, and I think you and I talked about this last time maybe a little bit that
Mm,
that history gets um, relegated to the teachers that
yeah,
no one else wants to teach this, and it
right.
becomes just a list of bullet points that we're giving kids, and
Yeah,
we lack some storytelling
yeah, a
in
lot,
history,
a lot.
something to make it come alive.
Yeah,
And that I think that's one reason that I love historical fiction is because it puts it puts skin on these historical figures and
yeah,
makes them feel real, and if they're real, then maybe I can relate to them in some way, and
Right.
maybe there's something I can learn from them,
Yeah.
for good or ill,
Yeah. And there's no test on Friday.
right.
That's the
That's the
big thing.
best part.
There's no test on Friday. But yeah, it's taught horribly in schools.
Yeah,
And it's not only taught horribly, but it's only taught from a narrow view.
right.
You don't get the African American contribution. You don't get the Chinese contribution. You don't get the great contributions of any of the marginalized demographics in the United States.
Right.
Um, and they and on their backs, this country was founded and formed.
Absolutely.
So I'm trying to do my little part with my little romance novels, and you know,
Well, and one problem with that is, if you've got one class period that is world history, and you're going to teach that in one school year, the farther away you get from events, the more they get reduced to just bullet points, because
yeah,
just how do you include
I
everything,
know,
so
I know,
so
yeah,
one of your romance books that takes a left turn over here and lets us really dig into this time
hmm
period and these people, I think that's really needed in the world.
yeah. We have a few college classes that are teaching some of my books, which is absolutely wonderful.
That is wonderful.
And then some of the women who read my books are in PhD history programs.
Oh, wow.
And one of the women got into an argument with her professor because he didn't believe that the Exodus, the Great Exodus of 1879, existed. I don't know how they got to talking about that. But she was like, yeah. He said, no, no, no. You got that mixed up with the 1900 and then he wound up telling her she made it up. And so she told me online, she said, luckily, Miss Bev, you put your citations in the back of the book. She said, so when I smacked him with those, I said,
Wow.
so how did he feel having to eat crow with his feet in his mouth? And she said, he wasn't happy at all. She said he was not happy. She said, but you got to be in the chorus. She said, so that was all that mattered. And then one night we were talking about Indian territory and the black and brown outlaws and the lawmen. And one of the women on my Twitter feed um, said her husband is in a PhD program on the West, the Wild West. He had never heard of any of the stuff that we were talking about. He didn't know anything about the Light Horse Police. He didn't know anything about Bass Reeves. He didn't know anything about Sequoia, which the Native Americans were going to name Oklahoma, or that the Native Americans and the Black Americans were both petitioning the government to try and make it a state for, the natives and for the Black people. We were going head and head about that. So I'm like, what are they teaching y'all in school? It's like, how can you not know about and be in a PhD program? So I gave him a reference for Art Burton's book, Black, Red, Deadly, which is Art's one of the best historians on the Black West. He is awesome. Um, so supposedly the PhD guy was going to go get this so he could know a little bit more than probably his professor. So yeah.
I love that you took him to school.
Well,
That's
hey, got to teach folks.
gotta teach him, and eating a little crow is good for the soul
Oh, I
sometimes.
think so too. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think so. So speaking of finding these historical nuggets
hmm
and these um, forgotten or things that we're just ignorant about for whatever reason,
Right.
when you happen on one of these events uh, time periods that you really want to write about, do you immerse yourself in the history beforehand and then the writing just kind of pours out of that? Or do you kind of have an idea and then as as things come up in the writing, do you research as you go? I
I,
guess
I do
do
both.
okay.
I do both. Yeah. For now, for most of the stuff in the 19th century, I have a pretty good knowledge, I
Hmm.
guess. So I don't have to do as much research now as I did when I first started. But if I'm in the middle of something and I don't know what, I'm looking for, or I need to know more, I will stop and do research. But then you go down the rabbit hole, and and you're down there for 2 days.
Right.
I was when I did Rebel. It's in New Orleans, and I really like to do the flora and the fauna, and what you hear at night when you're outside and all that. So it's frog sounds, right?
Right.
So I am researching frogs in Louisiana. So I'm listening to frogs and all of that, and I'm going deeper and deeper and deeper. And I get to the point I've forgotten about the frogs. I don't know what I'm doing. I run across a black guy who has a circus in the 19th century, and he would travel to the lumberjack camps in Wisconsin. And I'm like, whoa, 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 wait, what? So then I got really distracted. So he's going to show up in a book somewhere sometime, but
Well, how could he not?
I know. And who
That's
knew he was
fantastic.
there? You know, that's what you get for just, for researching frog sounds in Louisiana.
Right. You just never know where a circus is going to pop up.
Right, right. Run by a black guy. It's like, what?
Right. Like what? That's fantastic. That has
Yeah,
to be a book.
yeah.
Oh man. So Rare Danger takes us out of historical fiction into more modern
Hmm.
storytelling, and uh, and you talked about that. There's been several stories like that where you just kind of need to come out of history sometimes and write a car chase.
Yeah,
Do a lot of times in publishing, we want to kind of pigeonhole authors. Like when they're successful in something, why would you want to do something different? I need you to stay here and keep
right,
making great books that are going to make great money for everybody.
right.
Don't venture out. But as we talked about earlier, that readers should read widely. I think authors a lot of times want to stretch out and try something new. How do you feel um, about being able to write all over the place, and how has the industry responded to your desires to kind of try a little of this and a little of that from time to time?
I'm blessed to have an editor who trusts my writing. Um, she was the first person to ask me if I had any contemporaries. That's when I
Okay.
went back and dusted off that manuscript that beat me home from the post office that was so bad. Um, they have let me write young adult historicals. They've let me, or not let me, but encouraged me to write romantic suspense. I have an 11 book women's fiction series that is not romance that they've encouraged me to write. And yes, there are some houses that don't want their writers to go off the farm. They want
Sure.
them in that little barn,
Right.
making, turning straw into gold. Like what is that, Rumpelstiltskin?
Right.
Um, and a lot of them resent that
Yeah.
because you're so much more than sometimes than what you're known for. Um, and then that's one of the joys about the indie authors because they're all over the place,
Right.
and that's a good thing. And it's a good example for other writers too. But yeah, I'm blessed to, I'm in every sandbox. The only sandbox I have yet to play in is a fantasy sandbox. And I got a dragon book that I've also been lying to my readers about for the past 15 years that I'm going to write. I gave them 8 pages of it at the back of one of the novellas for the Blessing series. And I go place and they're like, can we have more dragon, please? And I'm like, I gotta pay the right to study, pay the bills first, but
Right.
I'm trying to get there. But yeah,
Was Was there a point in your career where you realized that there were Bev Jenkins readers, not just historical fiction readers, or not just African American history readers, or that you realized that people would follow you wherever you went?
Right. Um, yeah, when I did the young adults, because I think that was the first straying off the farm was the young adults. And I got letters from some of the young ladies that, would you tell my mama to give me the book, please? Because she's reading them and I haven't read them yet. I'm like, okay. Um, the Blessing series. I mean, I don't know if there was a first time, because I know that's your question, but I think all of the stuff that I've written in the last 28 years has brought people to the table that my publisher may not have realized was part of the demographic or decided to be part of the demographic.
Right.
Um, the Blessing series early on, I got an email from a retired Marine drill sergeant who was reading the Blessing series. And he wrote me and he said, I know your publisher doesn't believe I'm your part of your demographics. He said, but I love these damn books. I have a fan who is of the Blessing series who's a guy on the radio in Arkansas, wears a white hat. His wife turned him on to the books. They're probably either the same age or a little bit younger than I am, right? So these are old folks. And he follows me on Twitter. And I can't remember which book it was, but he sent me a tweet and he said, Bev, you shouldn't be making old white guys cry. I'm like, I'm sorry. But, the teens, and they're reading the Blessing series. Um, little girls sneaking the what we call the big girl books, sneaking and reading those at age 9 and 10. I'm like, get away from them books. That's why I wrote the young adult books for you. Leave your mama's books alone. You're not ready. You know, but I'm grateful for every one of them, because without them, I wouldn't be here. Books are expensive,
Yeah.
and they're working hard for their money, regardless of what they're doing. And they're taking that hard-earned money, and they're buying my hardcovers, and they're buying them in all forms. They got readers who buy the ebook, the paperback, and the Audible. They're in way too deep, but I love them for that. Um,
Well,
but yeah, my readers they mean the world to me.
well, speaking of Audible, because audiobooks have been around for a long time,
Hmm.
but Audible, and maybe it's the prevalence of smartphones
Hmm.
now, where we have all this storage in our pocket and it's convenient, and most people have headphones that they plug into it, and it's just really easy to listen to audiobooks now,
Hmm.
and maybe kind of this culmination of events cause that. But over the last several years, audiobooks have just boomed,
Exploded. Yeah,
and it's
exploded.
the
Yeah,
largest growth market in publishing right
yeah,
now.
yeah,
um, and you're absolutely right. There's reading your book, and then there's listening to a great narrator who's
yeah.
acting out. And I know you're not a huge audiobook fan.
Hmm.
I get that,
Yeah,
but you know that it's another experience.
yeah, it
You
is.
can read the book, and then hearing someone act it out is
Yeah,
is glorious when done right.
yeah.
Um,
That's what
how
I'm
do you
told.
yeah, how do you feel about that your books are now being consumed this way?
I think it's great. I mean, because we we take in our reading, our books in different formats. Some
Yeah.
people are more audio based, um, especially a lot of the senior citizens, who I am a part of that demographic. Um,
Hey, I got an AARP card in the mail the other day, and I don't know how to
oh,
feel about that.
bless you. I've had mine for about 20 years. I'm like, why are you sending this to me?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, and then you also, okay, so we have the audio, we have the ebooks, we have print, and now we have the chapters kind of stuff,
Right.
where they're reading on their phones a chapter a week, and then you buy tokens or something, and then they give you another chapter. So it's whatever floats your boat. Um, I'm just glad to be an author alive at this time,
Right.
because there are so many different streams that our readers can take in our stories. And that has to be a good thing.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Miss Bev, we could chat all day long.
I
I know
know.
it, but
We could
but
chat till
we
next Tuesday.
yeah, but we need to land this plane.
Okay.
Your newest, your latest book is Rare Danger, and
Hmm.
we talked about that. But I have a feeling that there's more coming from you this year.
Yeah, I'm trying to get, speaking about lying to my readers, about the dragon book. I've also been lying to them about a suspense book that they've been waiting for. That's on a side character in Sexy Dangerous, and so I'm going to try and do that this summer, before Raven comes out, and then I move on to the next Blessings book. So I got a whole lot more years behind me than I have ahead of me. So, and then the people in the green room in my head are tapping on their clocks going, all right, lady, come on now. Need you to tell my story. So I love what I do, but I'm having a ball. I'm having
Well,
a
just
ball.
because the road is long behind you doesn't mean it's dim going forward either.
No, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Yeah,
I'm still trying to figure out who I'm gonna be when I grow up.
there you
So
go. And I hope you never find out.
me
I hope
either.
you're always constantly looking.
Yeah.
Uh, Miss Bev, tell people where they can find you online if they want to dig into your massive back catalog and
You can find the website is beverlyjenkins.net.
okay,
I have one, two, three, or four Facebook pages, depending on how you want to deal with it. I am also on Twitter. I love Twitter. Love Twitter. I am at author Miss Bev on Twitter. That's why my books are always late, because I'm on Twitter playing around. My editor's pulling out her hair. Um, but yeah, you can find me, and my books are, as we said, in all formats, um, all retailers, iBooks, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, you name it. And independent stores, support your local indie store, please.
absolutely.
Um, and I'll see you when Raven comes out. She's a grifter. We are
Let's do
looking
it.
for a stolen copy of the Declaration of Independence. And there's a whole story behind that, too. So, yeah, yeah.
Ooh, I'm sold. That's all I need to hear. That's all I need to hear. Well, please come back and let's talk about it when it comes out.
That sounds good.
All
Just
right.
send me a link, and
All
I'll be
right.
here. Okay.
Well, thank you for joining me, Miss Bev.
Thanks for having me. You take care.